My name is Liliana Vallejo, and I'll be talking about gender through the intersectionality lens for my gender application presentation. They say that in order to fully understand someone's struggle and experiences, you must first walk a mile in their shoes. And I think this is absolutely true, especially when we acknowledge and talk about intersectionality when we evaluate gender. When talking about intersectionality, we highlight the issues around race, sexuality, gender, and socioeconomic background to emphasize the different ways that society has marginalized these communities. Before we implement any change, we must first acknowledge that white women have benefited far more from the patriarchy system than Black, Latino, or other women of color. Those categories in the system include, but are not limited to, healthcare, jobs, education, etc. Today, I'll be talking about Audre Lorde's Age, Race, Class, and Sex article, while also implementing my media text, which is a clip of the sitcom Blackish. And I will deliver my analysis based on my media text. In Audrey's the author is trying to tell the reader that that based on people's race, these groups have been oppressed for a really long time, and Audrey points that out in society today. She talks about how, as a society, we've developed this fear for the different, and we have three categories that we choose to do something about this difference, and it's either ignore, copy, or destroy. When we ignore something, we choose to ignore it because maybe it's a hard reality to think about, or we ignore it because it doesn't affect us. The second one is copy. Privileged groups and people in power tend to copy cultural behaviors or social behaviors so that they can feel like they have the power over the minority. And that's how they take control of that situation. And the third one is to simply destroy it. If people in power do not like what they see, then they will destroy it so that nobody can ever know that that existed. And we've seen this throughout history, from the civil rights movement to the colonization of Americans in the United States, specifically the Native Americans, and destroyed. Maybe we've seen it through slavery. Audre Lorde also explained her how in her Black community she has suffered discrimination, and which is why it's so important to talk about intersectionality, because even though in her own community they share this concept of race, which is being a Black American, she still suffers some type of discrimination based off her sexuality. And she talks about how within our own communities, we can find discrimination if it's not from something that's other things. And as an example, she used homophobia. She later on calls out white women by saying that ignoring all the issues regarding race, they are ignoring the built-in privilege. And according to Audre Lorde in 2007, by and large within the women's movement today, white women focus upon their oppression as women and ignore differences of race, sexual preference, class, and age. So like I mentioned before, um, there is no real sisterhood and no woman empowerment to when they choose to ignore race but acknowledge that they are women. So this is why some people go through more struggles than others. And she later calls out women, like I mentioned, because they're trying to separate issues of women's oppression without acknowledging these factors. Um, and according to Tom Yape in 2000, sorry, according to Toward Yape in 2015, social identity is non-summative, a gestalt that cannot be reduced to discrete parts, such as simply race or simply gender, without understanding how such part interacts to form a whole that is greater than its individual component. So here, Yelp is also mentioning how we are a complex human being, that we cannot identify as just women, that part of our culture and it's also part of our identity. So it's hard to acknowledge these, it's hard to not acknowledge these two things.